Thinking Aloud. Conversations on the leading edge of knowledge and discovery with psychologist Jeffrey Mishlove.
Hello and welcome. I'm Jeffrey Mishlove, and this is part 3 of our 3-part series on the practical applications of precognition. With me once again is Marty Rosenblatt, who is a computational physicist who has had a long career in both the military and industrial sectors and is currently the president of the Applied Precognition Project. Once again, welcome, Marty.
Happy to be here.
Yeah. We've talked in part 1 of this 3-part series on the history of remote viewing and the associative remote viewing methodology and on precognition. In part 2, we focused more specifically on your research, your applied work with the Applied Precognition Project. And now, for our 3rd segment, let's focus on the psychology and the philosophy of working with people to help them to enter into a state of mind where they can use precognition.
Okay, it is all psychological. Okay, people have to get into the kind of state where they're open to getting information from, it's sort of outside of themselves is a way of saying it. I talk about it as the subconscious, the higher self. There's those kind of connections with information. And it's information of the past, the present, the future. And I think it's really marvelous to see people really get that they have this natural capability.
Because a lot of people probably operate under the everyday assumption that this is impossible and therefore they can't do it.
Or because so many people have had some experiences, or it happens randomly. One of the things we're about with this associative remote viewing is doing it on purpose. And that's different. And that really is part of this paradigm shift that you occasionally talk about with consciousness, that you can apply it for a purpose that will serve you and others. So
I know when I first worked with Russell Targ at SRI back in the early 1970s doing remote viewing, he put it this way to me. He was the monitor, the person who helped me get into a state of mind conducive to remote viewing. And he said it very simply. He said, ask your subconscious for permission to obtain information from far away in space just for this 10-minute period of the viewing.
That's right. Let go of the ego that might think you can't and allow yourself to do it.
Just for 10 minutes.
And that is all part of the psychology. One of the things which I've seen it does is it allows people to get involved in their non-physical aspect. Again, it's the subconscious is kind of the non-physical part of them, and it connects to something even bigger. And when they get a sense of that, it's marvelous. It's a aha. They love it. And there's also an intellectual part of this that I think is really worth talking about, because you want your intellect to not say this is really impossible. Okay, 10 minutes. You really want to do this for the long term. You want this to be something where you can say, you know what, the universe really works like this. Why don't I use it? It is obviously something which would be advantageous if I can get information about my own future. So there's this idea. There's this idea which goes back for eons of, I call it the universe of collective consciousness. Okay, and it allows information transfer between the present and the past, and the present, and the future. And of course, that's what precognition is.
Right.
And that's what's always interested me, is that this limitation we've always felt of cause and effect, that the cause happened now and then all the effects followed. It's not that simple.
Backwards causality
Backwards
is
causality,
becoming a fashionable phrase in physics these days.
some aspects of physics.
There are conferences on the subject.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right, and it's marvelous to see, but most physicists will still not accept it because there's no model. There's no understanding. And
well, I understand that in quantum physics at the subatomic level, it's thought that there's no reason that time can't move in both directions. Things are typically symmetrical, and forward in time and backwards in time doesn't seem to be a problem at that level.
in terms of the equations, that is correct. And what's so interesting about that, it also, quantum mechanics has this concept of non-locality, which in fact has been experimentally verified. You know, and that's like if you get two photons going out in opposite directions, you can tweak one and the other one seems to know about it instantly, faster than the speed of light. Kind of remarkable. A little bit like maybe precognition.
Perhaps.
And quantum mechanics happens to be another area where you don't quite understand it. In fact, Richard Feynman, Caltech Nobel laureate, says anybody, paraphrasing here, but anybody who says they understand quantum mechanics is fooling themselves. The equations are such that they are the best predictor of the physical world we know on the small scale, but it's hard to explain. So people come up with interpretations, and there are many interpretations of quantum mechanics.
And they all involve a paradox of one kind or another.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Now, I think that's where we are in consciousness, except we don't have those equations. And that's why so many physicists resist the idea. While I totally accept some aspects of physics are moving into this area, plus consciousness is being studied more and more with the fMRIs and all the experiments they can do.
Yeah, looking into the brain.
Exactly. Which is different than the mind.
Yeah.
We still don't quite understand where information itself comes from. Can I give you a model?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
This is a model you use working with people in the Applied Precognition Project.
To try to get them to intellectually accept that they're far greater than they normally think they are. I mean, that's the purpose, is to get the intellect to be a player. You know, I mean, you don't want to deny the intellect. When you're talking to your subconscious, yeah, I'll set it aside, but it's still part of you. Okay. There's this universe of collective consciousness. I like to think of it as a circle without a boundary. And let me see if I can explain to you why. The universe of collective consciousness is this idea that anything which consciousness touches, my thought, oh, I'm looking at this right now. My image, oh, I'm touching this right now. My consciousness, my feeling of that beautiful piece, okay, right now has gone into this universe of collective consciousness. But notice it happened in the now. Things go into the universe of collective consciousness by a direct experience of consciousness. You're conscious only here and now. This is your direct consciousness. Now, guess what? Everything that you're conscious of in your life, in the past, it's in there. Everybody else who's had conscious moments, they're in this universe of collective consciousness.
Some people call the Akashic records.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But not only does it include the past, precognition, which is the marvelous thing about it, shows that somehow, in a way we don't understand, future conscious moments are in there as well. So when I do a remote viewing session now, asking about a feedback picture I'm going to see in the future, I know that that future now is in this universe of collective consciousness. So now why is it a circle without a boundary? Because if I can think, feel, sense in any way that there's something else, oh, I've come up with something entirely new. Guess what? As soon as I've done that, it's in the circle without a boundary. You cannot have a boundary. So anything in the largest sense you can imagine, ideas, emotions, events, everything has to have what I call a fuzzy boundary.
Well, a circle without a boundary is in effect infinite.
That's right. It's like our physical universe. But now this is a universe of consciousness. Everything we know about the physical universe comes through our consciousness. I'm not saying the objective universe is there. You and I are basically seeing the same thing. We're seeing it from different angles, but that's the objective physical universe. It exists. It has its own laws. All of those laws are in this universe of physical consciousness. Quantum mechanics was in there all the time. It took them a long time to discover it. I think there are universal physical laws which are even broader than that will encompass quantum mechanics, Newtonian mechanics, but it'll also include, in a way, of precognition. It'll include these deep aspects of consciousness.
Well, it suggests to me what you're saying with this infinitely large circle, that there is a future, let's say the future of humanity, 1 million years from now, should we survive, we'll have very, very advanced sciences at that time, and it may well be at that point humans will have evolved to the point where everybody is psychic and is being used all the time. And from that future, we are receiving a signal that is kind of calling us and trying to awaken us to that level.
Beautiful. I think that is just right. I wrote a book, Ours to See, many, many years ago when I was in this, 10 chapters. And when I got to the 10th chapter, that was exactly the image I had. I had a group of people going back 5,000 years. And I had the sense that they had to go forward 5,000 years, and it was from 5,000 years in the future that they shared this image of God. Okay? So I think what you're saying is right. I think ARV is a way we can share images over short periods of time, but I believe our wiser future society could well be sharing information with us now.
Now, I know a lot of theologians and philosophers and cosmologists have all been speculating about this, and probably many of them point to an ultimate future, not just where people are awakened to their psychic abilities, but have become spiritually enlightened as well, the omega point.
Look, whether the word spiritual to some people is a turnoff, but whether you like it or not, I believe that's what we're talking about here. There's a physical reality, okay? We agree on so much. So I don't want to give up the physical world. I like the physical world. I love chocolate. That's a physical world thing, okay? I love the physical world. But there is this non-physical world, and I have no problem calling it a spiritual world. And it is deep, and it's marvelous, and it's in that world where we have this kind of universal connection. That's this universe of collective consciousness. You are indeed connected to everything. Now, it doesn't always rise to the level of your personal consciousness. Now, that may be when the yogas of the East get into the state of nirvana. That was always my picture of nirvana, that you felt, you disappear and you are like one with everything. Okay, most of us don't get to that point. And in fact, my interest is actually in keeping one leg in the physical world and one leg in this spiritual world and bringing them together in a way which will benefit society.
Well, you know, on one occasion, I had the opportunity to ask Gary Zukav, the author of The Seat of the Soul and The Dancing Woolly Masters and other books, about the ARV protocol and applied precognition. And I said, how does it work in your mind when a person tries to use their intuition to predict the stock market, for example? And he said, a person's ability to do that will always be dependent upon their own karma. That result they get is dependent upon their karma. Is that a concept that you work with, that you're at all comfortable with?
I've always had trouble with karma, because karma, the way I've heard it defined in many different ways, is something which seems to be outside of you that's affecting you. I don't believe that. I believe you are totally responsible for you. What happens to you now has been influenced by the past, been influenced by the future, but you have the free will to bring it into the now. So that does not resonate with me.
Okay. Do you find that when people come to your Applied Precognition Project that certain people are easily discouraged, that if they have a few misses, they begin to feel like, what's the point? There's nothing to this. Obviously, I was mistaken in the first place. It's all fantasy, etc.
Absolutely.
You do
and
get
some
that,
people, oh yeah, some people come and they drop out for whatever reason. The most marvelous part are the ones that stay and take on the challenge of the misses. We often say there's more to be learned from the misses than the hits, but there's stuff to be learned from the hits as well. But the ones that stay into this for the long term, are taking responsibility. Now, karma has to do, the image I have of it, of things that have happened in the past somehow. Okay, the idea of reincarnation, karma, and all that. But how it happened, what you're connected to. See, this universal collective consciousness, whether it was another life in anything close to a literal sense, or for whatever reason you're connected to other aspects of this universe of collective consciousness, so be it. Yes, you have these entanglements. That, by the way, is a quantum mechanical word. Okay? So it works here very nicely.
Oh, all right. Well, since you introduced entanglements as a quantum mechanical word, even though it does have normal, everyday connotations, why don't we define it?
Well, entanglement, again, like these two light photons, particles, they start out together, but they send off different. So they're entangled. No matter how far apart they get, they continue to be entangled.
Instantly affecting each other.
No matter how far apart they are, they're instantly entangled in a physical sense. So distance doesn't matter, the time doesn't matter, they are entangled. It very much is the same as the common sense word, okay, of connected, okay? But it's not a physical connection. It's a connection in this non-physical space that we're talking about.
I think Einstein once referred to it as spooky action at a distance.
Right. One of the few things he was wrong about. He didn't believe
because he thought that this would disprove quantum mechanics, that spooky action at a distance must be impossible. It turned out not to be.
Exactly. 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 Quantum mechanics is as close, at least that I know of to what we see in precognition. In fact, now we mentioned quantum mechanics, let me add one other thing. This universe of collective consciousness sounds like, and is very close, I think, to I think it was Plato, maybe even pre-Plato, where they had this idea that the most fundamental thing were ideas. Okay? The idea of red is more fundamental than your experience of red.
Platonic forms. And
exactly.
So on. Yes.
That's like the universal collective consciousness. It's like the Jungian collective unconscious. I don't like the word unconscious. Okay? There's nothing that's not conscious. Okay? There's a universe of collective consciousness. But similar ideas. quantum mechanics has this idea of 0-point energy. Not disputed. This is
the energy of a pure vacuum.
The energy, if you went to a place where you thought there was nothing, you still get 0-point energy. And fluctuations.
In fact, it's very interesting that you bring this up, because one of the main papers on 0-point energy was co-authored by Hal Puthoff, whom we referred to in our very first interview as one of the important pioneers in the field of remote viewing.
I find that very interesting too.
Yeah.
And I wonder if he was drawn to that in coming to a conclusion, which I now want to give you, which I've come to.
Yes.
He may have come to the same conclusion, which is the 0-point energy field. And you have to understand, it isn't only in vacuum. If I go down and get smaller and smaller and smaller to any part of my body, okay, I'll go down to cells. But now I get one part of the cell, and I go smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. I get subatomic. I get smaller than electrons. I get really small. Guess what I get to? The 0-point energy field. The 0-point energy field is the most fundamental thing you can imagine in the physical world. It's everywhere, every time.
And it's almost infinite energy, is it not?
It's got the same level as when a nuclear bomb goes off. The energy density is the same as that.
And it permeates our bodies.
It's the base. It's like, the only analogy I can give is the deepest ocean has huge pressures, but they're a little fishy down there. And what matters is the modification of the little tail that moves. Just fine, thank you. We have that energy within us. Okay. Now, what better place to imagine, can't prove it, but what better place to imagine as the interface between the universe of collective consciousness, the non-physical, and the physical world than the 0-point energy field. So that's just it's an interpretation, just like
it's one way of looking at it, and what you're suggesting is that in our mind we can focus on that 0-point energy field, and from there retrieve information from anywhere in time or space that we focus on.
Correct. And I even want to go a step further now. I don't usually talk about health, but once I get into this level, it seems clear to me that when I concentrate, when I meditate, I can meditate on that level through all the cells in my body, go down to the 0-point energy field, and bring in healthy energy. Okay, with intent. I mean, precognition only works with intent. All these things you see become connected.
Well, now you're talking about a little bit more than precognition. You seem to be talking about mind over matter.
Absolutely.
Or psychokinesis.
Absolutely.
Which is very, very closely related to precognition. Parapsychologists often point out that it's hard philosophically to know if you say such an event will happen and then it happens, did you predict it or did you cause it?
Exactly. Are you part of the creation? And the fact of the matter is, I believe you are part of the creation process. And accepting that, wouldn't that be a paradigm shift?
Some physicists whom I've interviewed think it's related to the multiple universe theory, that we have millions of potential universes we could enter into second by second by second, and we sort of maneuver our lives through these possibilities.
I'm almost sorry you brought that up, because I am not an advocate of that point of view.
Okay.
Let me tell you why, though. Universe means one. You can't have multiple universes, but they mean multiple things like universes. I'll tell you what I do believe in that's close to that. And quantum mechanics has this. There are potential outcomes, just like the sports event. Okay, when you look at it, there are potential outcomes. Quantum mechanics can contain all of these potential outcomes. Okay, I accept that those exist. Only one happens.
Okay. Well,
I'm knocking that now. For whatever reason, I could have done all kinds of things, but I'm doing that. That's the one that happened.
This is the one where we are right now, and if you're viewing this video, you're sharing it with us.
That's right.
Even if you're at a different point in time and space
that's right.
than we are at this moment.
Right. but it's you. You're not in some other place. I know, my here and now, right now.
We're all sharing a collective consciousness together across time and space with our viewers.
Yes, we are. Yes, we are. So
there's a sense in which this very medium lends itself to thinking about the subject of precognition.
It is kind of amazing that we are in a time where we almost have the equivalent of telepathy in our physical world. I can be in touch with anybody, anywhere in the world, almost instantly. And that's kind of amazing.
It is amazing, and I imagine that may have to do with the atrophy of psychic functioning in modern culture. I mean, why use telepathy when we have a telephone?
Well, you're right. I never really thought about it that way. I think you're right.
I think in some indigenous cultures where they don't have all of our technology, they're more open to the psychic realm.
And that may be very true of precognition.
Yeah.
Way back when, it would have helped if I knew about the saber-toothed tiger around the corner, right?
Yeah.
I don't have to worry about that today.
Well, Marty Rosenblatt, our time is up once again. It goes quickly with you. It's been a delight. Thank you so much for sharing these 3 half hours with me.
Thank you. Thank you, Jeff.
And thank you for being with us.